A wise man once said that God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. I love that statement because God doesn't call you based on how good you are and what you have to offer. God calls you, and once he calls you to do something, he equips you for the task. You see, God doesn't wait till you have it all together. He calls you even when you're broken, and he still says that he sees potential and usefulness and purpose in you. So let's look at Gideon, let's look at Moses, and let's look at David for a quick moment. So Gideon, it says in Judges chapter 6, verse 11, right? It says, "Now an angel of the Lord came and sat under a terebinth tree, which was at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Azarite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide from the Midianites." You see, the Midianites were an opposing army that was coming against Israel, and Gideon, it says that he was hiding, he was afraid, he was fearful of the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." You see, what's amazing is that God came to someone who was afraid, and an angel said, "You are a mighty man of war. You are a strong man." God said to Gideon, "You are strong," in the midst of when Gideon was hiding in weakness. Okay, let's look at Moses for a second. Moses, he had a speech issue. He said he's slow of speech, and yet God said to him, "I want you to speak to Pharaoh. I want you to go to the king." That's like saying to us in our society today that I want you to go to the president and tell him, "This is what I demand you to do." That takes a lot of courage. And God said to Moses, "Go and speak, and I'm going to use you. I'm going to work through you." But Moses said, "I can't speak. I've had problems my whole life." But God still said to Moses, "I want to use you to deliver my people." Let's look at David for a second. The prophet Samuel, God told him who was going to be the anointed king. And so Jesse, the father of David, great name by the way, brings all of the 10 sons of Jesse. He brings all of his sons together to go through the list of who God was going to use to be the one to be anointed as king. And so he goes through the list of all his 10 sons. He brings it was 7 sons, I believe. I gotta double check that. But he brings his sons, and he brings the son that's the wisest. He brings a son that's the most handsome and the most strong. And he goes through the list of all his sons, but he doesn't include David in the list. He's the only son that's left out. But Samuel said, "You have another son. If you have another son, bring him here." And when David came, Samuel saw him, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and said, "This is the one. This is the anointed son who is going to be used." You see, David, from a natural perspective, did not look like the most useful son. But God said to David, and God said to Jesse, he said, "Man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart." You see, God sees the potential in you. He sees the potential in me. And you see, when God appears to people, he uses them even in their weakness. Think about Joshua for a moment. He was called to lead Israel after Moses died, and Joshua surely was afraid, and God said to him, guys, he said, Joshua 1:9, "Do not be dismayed, do not be afraid, be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you everywhere you go." You see, God doesn't he doesn't call the equipped. He doesn't call the people who are equipped with everything. They're ready to go. They're perfect. They have it all down. They're spiritual masters. No, he doesn't call the people that have everything perfect. No, he equips you after he calls you for the tasks. He actually calls you often in your weakness. You see, let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 says this, starting in verse 26. Paul is reminding the Corinthians of the state that they were in when God called them. God says in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26, "For consider your calling, brethren, that not many were wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of this world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And the base things of the world and the things that are despised, God has chosen, and the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. But of him you are in Christ Jesus, who became for us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification, and redemption, that as it is written, let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. You see, God says in Corinthians, through Apostle Paul, that he chose the foolish things of the world, not the mighty, not the people that had it all together, not the people with the most degrees. He didn't call the people with the greatest status. He called the people of a low status to be the useful ones for the kingdom. Think about the disciples that Jesus chose. He didn't choose the wisest Pharisee. He didn't choose the people who mastered the law. He chose fishermen, tax collectors, which was like the lowest place in society. God chose fishermen, tax collectors. He chose a zealot, which is crazy. This guy was so radical that he was killing people. He was like an undercover assassin. Basically, God chose an assassin to be his disciple, right? God chose James and John, the sons of thunder, people who were just, they had tons of energy. They were, all over the place, right? He chose people that were, just common people to be used for his kingdom. And if you watch The Chosen, they have a cool way of showing how each of the disciples, they have their weakness. And so I just wanted to encourage you that God is calling you. And he loves you, and he wants to use you. He wants to say to you, like he said to Gideon, you're a mighty man, a mighty woman of valor. Right now, you feel like you're hiding. You feel like you're afraid. You feel like your infirmities are stopping you. You're looking at other people, and you're saying, wow, they're so gifted, but me, God can't really use you. But God's saying, I can use you. I want to use you. If you will just humble yourself and allow my power to be made perfect in weakness, you'll see that I can take your mess and make it into a message. I'll take the test and turn it into a testimony. I'll turn your weakness and turn it into strength. I'll take your ashes and turn them into beauty. I'll turn your brokenness and turn it into a blessing. If you would only put it in God's hands, watch what he can do with it. He can multiply it. He can multiply the little that you have. The little mustard seed of faith. God, when you plant a seed, it starts off small, but it grows into a huge thing. You might have a little bit to offer. You might feel like it's not enough. You might feel like you can't do it, but just offer him your heart, that little heart that you have, and watch God multiply and use that for his kingdom. You see, God says to you, in the midst of you feeling unworthy, that you're worthy. In the midst of you feeling like you can't be saved, he says you're washed in the blood. In the midst of you saying that you feel like you don't belong, God says you're adopted into my family. In the midst of feeling confused, he says you're my sheep. When you feel like you have no shepherd, you see, God is wanting to use you for his glory. He wants you to be a vessel for his kingdom. But don't feel like you have to have it all together. Don't feel like you have to be perfect. Just give him your heart and watch what he'll do with it. Look at the people in the Bible. Man, they were messed up, but God still got the glory through them. God bless.